So I'm posting these links on our class webpage if you need them for any reason. So what I've been doing is that I upload these to YouTube, and then you can click the link and it should take you to YouTube. That way, if you need it, there's closed captioning, or if you just need to check something from class again, they're there. But um, they're there on YouTube for anyone to see, which makes me nervous, but whatever. They're there for you in case you need them. Okay. The other thing is I wanted to let you know, I've gone through all your discussion questions. I've looked through them. I haven't finished grading them, but I've looked through all of them, and you're good. You did great. Most of you did fantastic. It's really what I was looking for. Did good. I wanted to remind you there is a rubric out there just in case you want it and you're not happy with your first grade. I don't know why you wouldn't be, because you all did fantastic. But if you are not, yes, I can do that. I can make it private and send you the link. I can totally do that. But if you want a rubric for your discussion post, there is one attached just in case. I don't know if you want it or not, but it's there. There's also one for essays, your essays as well, in case I know for a fact that none of you are thinking about your midterm essays at this point. I know that 100%. I get it. But there is one out there just in case at some point in the upcoming weeks you decide, hey, I should probably maybe take a look at it. It's there too. And there was one more thing I wanted to remind. No, two more things. Sorry. The first thing is for discussion post, please, I think the biggest thing was please don't forget to include some sort of citation, some source that you looked at to justify your, I don't mean justify, but to support your post. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be like a page number or something, but if you could just put in general what you're referencing, I'll get it. It's fine. So cite sources, that's a big deal. And then the other thing is I wanted to tell you, remind you before the end of class, and I forget, is that there's another SI session this afternoon from 2:30 to 4. I apologize if this is during classes, but I think this is going to be the standard time for most of her SI sessions, for most of Natasha's sessions, because she's also taking classes. And so she has to fit them into her class schedule as well. So if that doesn't work for you, you can definitely reach out to her and schedule a one-on-one meeting, and that will count as well as extra credit. She'll let me know. That's fine. But there is one today from 2:30 to 4. She's available. I think she's focusing on textbook reading and taking notes, maybe something like that. I don't know. She posted something about it in the class webpage, like the announcements section. So, okay, awesome. Thank you. So the SI sessions are not recorded. They're not. They are completely private, and I can't ask her who has attended. I can't specifically say, hey, did this person come to an SI session? Because those are supposed to be between you. But she can let me know. We've figured out a way around it so that I can give you extra credit for going to those. So we're, yeah, I'm sorry. I know it's a weird time. She also has, I think she's taken like 15 hours this semester as well. So she's crazy busy as well. I'm sorry about that. But she does have office hours on the weekends as well, on Saturday mornings. If you need her, that may be better for you. I don't know. Okay. Any other questions before we get started on this chapter? Super short chapter. I don't know. Seems like a short, or just maybe because it's just the one. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about, just the one instead of 2 chapters this time. But this textbook is weird to me because they focus on just Jamestown, and then they start talking about the slave trade before we even talk about like Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower and all that. Wait, they don't talk about that till the next chapter, which is weird to me. I don't understand. It's out of order, in my opinion, but whatever. We'll do it with textbooks. We'll do it their way. Ish. We'll do it their way. Okay. So any questions before we get started? I'm gonna go ahead and start on chapter 3, whatever this is. Good. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. Let me ask you this. Would you like to see my PowerPoint pictures? Do you want to see the pictures, or would you prefer to stay in gallery? Does it matter to you?
Pictures.
Pictures?
I like the pictures.
Pictures. I assumed. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't. Oh, sorry, somebody's coming in. I just want to make sure it wasn't weird for you guys to see the picture. No, that's not what I want. I want this one. Here we go. Okay. I had to rearrange this PowerPoint because mine was definitely not in the order of your textbook. Okay. Move. I need to do this. Go. Move. Slideshow. There we go. Okay. Put this back. Go back. I'm so sorry. This is so annoying. Move. Okay, there we go. Finally got it. Okay. So let's talk Jamestown, I guess, is where we're starting here. Your textbook starts with actually your last chapter, chapter 2, had a little bit about the very first attempts at colonizing the New World, England's attempt at setting up a colony in the New World, which was Roanoke. And that failed miserably, like really, really bad. When they came back to check on them years later, they were completely gone. They disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to those people. It's crazy. But so that one failed. So we're moving on to a new attempt at settling the New World by the English. The Spanish are definitely already there. The French have started coming over. They're setting up forts and trading posts and making contact with all the Native American tribes. Spain is mostly to the south. They're mostly Mesoamerica and South America for right now. France is more centered in the north. They're mostly, well, Canada. I mean, that's why we have French Canadians. So they're mostly Canada, and they're mostly fur trading for the most part, is where French make their money. So England settles for the middle part. We're going right for the middle of North America here. They want to get in on claiming some of this New World land that that the French and the Spanish have started to claim. They want the gold from it. They think there might be gold there, so they want the gold from it. They want the resources. There is one thing about North America that makes it incredibly valuable, and that's our natural resources. Timber, oil, water. We have a lot of water, streams and rivers, gold, silver, things like that. So we're abundant in natural resources, which makes it ideal for countries coming over to colonize eventually. So there are two main groups of people who are coming over to the New World. One, those who are escaping religious persecution, both Catholic and Protestant, escaping what they consider to be persecution of their religious beliefs. Let's do this. And then two, just usually young men who are looking for an opportunity to make something of themselves, to stake a claim in the New World, have some land, hopefully settle and start get rich. That's their goals here. Young men, usually, young single men, usually. Most of the time, these guys are second sons or third sons, fourth sons. So these are young men who are not going to inherit land or titles when their fathers pass away for the most part. So they have to do something for themselves. They have to do something on their own. This seems like a good way for them to do it, basically, is the idea. They come to start private business ventures, which is completely different than the Spanish and the French, because the Spanish and the French are all sponsored by the crown. They're all sponsored by the government. English are different because they start their own companies. They start joint stock companies. So a lot of people invest in these companies, hoping that when these guys get to the New World, they'll strike it rich and hopefully the investment will pay off. That's the idea. They're not sponsored by the King and Queen of England. They're private businesses. So,
Shit, I figured. Fuck. There was nothing wrong with that towel up on the shower, was it?
somebody is unmuted. And sorry about whatever's happening there. It sounds bad. I don't know. Okay. So those are huge differences between France. I'm blushing. Can you tell? I just got super red in the face. Sorry. That threw me off. So, big difference between England and France and Spain. That is what I was trying to discuss. Okay, joint stock companies. Let's talk about the Chesapeake Bay. Oh my God, I can feel my face just burning. Okay, Chesapeake Bay, which is Jamestown, is where we're starting here. The king and queen had given a charter to the first guy to come to the New World, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, but it didn't work out for him, right? Remember we talked about, well, just now we mentioned, and it's in your last chapter, Roanoke. When they come back to find these people, there's literally nothing left of that colony. The only thing they found was the word Croatoan carved in a tree. They don't know what that means. Historians never figured out what that meant. If it's a Native American word, if it was a tribe of Native Americans, nobody has any idea. They're literally just gone, disappeared. So now that we started these new joint ventures, we have other people who are coming. So really the first one that we have here is Jamestown, named after the king, because he's still the king. So you got to name stuff for him, I guess. I don't know. But Jamestown is our official first colony, our first settlement in the New World from England. Okay. It is on the Chesapeake Bay off the coast of Virginia. First settled in about May of 1607 is when the colonists first land in the Chesapeake Bay area. The idea here is to build a fort close enough to the water where you could fish and land boats, far enough away from the water where you're safe from Spanish attack by sea, close enough to the Native Americans where you could hopefully trade with them if need be, but far enough away from them so that you're not like right on top of them and hopefully going to cause disturbances between you. Hopefully there's no fighting. So they're really trying to figure out the best place to put this fort. It's really close to the water in the very beginning. It's very close to the edge of the ocean there, which is terrible. It's a terrible idea because there's no proper drainage. So if you try to dig a well to get drinking water, it's going to be a mix of fresh and salt water, which you can't drink. The other thing is because there's no drainage, there's no way to, what's a good way to put this? Safely remove waste from your town to get it away from your village, which means that it also mixes with your drinking water. That's real bad too, because then you get dysentery. Dysentery is probably one of the worst ways I can think of to die. It's god awful. You basically I was about to say a bad word. My kid's right there. Sorry. You basically dehydrate yourself because nothing stays in your body. You throw up and get rid of literally everything in your body really fast, and your organs shut down because you dehydrate. Oh, that seems like the worst way to die. Okay, anyway, a lot of dysentery happening in Jamestown. The other thing is because it's so swampy and the land is not great, it's not great for planting crops. So that's kind of a bust. You're running out of food. The last thing is there's a lot of mosquitoes that live right there on the coast because of the water. And so a lot of people are also contracting malaria. So all in all, not a great place to build a fort. I don't know. And they are almost right on top of the Powhatan Indians. So, which comes in handy soon, but then after it comes in handy, it's not great. So, you know, all of that. Okay. So the relationship that they have with the Powhatan Indians when they first established this fort is actually pretty good. They have a decent trade relationship with the Powhatan Indians. It starts well. They trade corn. I think the Powhatan Indians feel sorry for them and eventually just give them corn because they see they're starving to death. The other thing is it starts off as a good relationship up until the point where the Powhatan Indians realize that they're staying. They're not coming and looking around and going home. They're actually setting up a permanent settlement here. And so I think once the Powhatans realize that, they decide, wait, this is not what we signed up for. This is not what we wanted. So then relations get tense between them. I'm so sorry. Hang on one second. Hey, Simon, can you please stop for just a second, please? Please, please. Thank you very much. Okay. So they, the English try to expel the Native Americans from their land when they first get there and try to limit all contact they have with them. However, they don't realize that they're about to go through an incredibly difficult first year. They're starving to death. They're freezing to death. They don't have clean drinking water. People are dying of disease. It's really bad for the settlers the first few years. And so they kind of reevaluate that and they decide maybe we should trade with them after all. And they do. Thank God, because it saved their lives. But, oh, here's John Smith's original drawing of Jamestown. There you go. Okay. And there's John Smith, portrait of him, what we think he probably looked like. He doesn't really look like the Disney version, that's for sure. And Pocahontas. Let's talk about Pocahontas. Her real name was not Pocahontas. Her real name was Manitowoc. And Pocahontas was a nickname that they gave her. That means playful one because she was a very big tomboy. And she liked to run around naked, which she was allowed to do because she was the king's daughter. So she was the chief's daughter. She pretty much could do whatever she wanted. But she was kind of a big tomboy. So they called her Pocahontas as a nickname. And also not at all like the Disney version, at all. In fact, I really don't like the Disney version. I don't know. It bothers me tremendously. I can't watch it. My niece tried to make me watch it, and I was like, well, that's historically inaccurate. She's 4. She was like, stop talking. Anyway, I could barely make it through it. It was terrible for me. I kept trying to tell her about stuff. She's like, Aunt Tiffy, you have to stop talking right now. I know, I can't help it. But she does meet John Smith. They do meet at some point. Oh, I have a clip of the Disney movie in here. We're not gonna watch that. They do meet, she and John Smith. That is true. However, he's in his 30s. He's like 32, 33 when he first meets with the Powhatan Indians, and she's 12. So it's not like there's any kind of relationship there. There's no love interest. There's no, Disney version Romeo and Juliet thing happening between them. But it never happens. Also, this whole notion that Pocahontas saves his life because her father was going to kill him, all that. We don't know if that actually happened either. Some historians believe that the Powhatans were initiating him into their tribe, and it was a ritual that he was involved in. Pocahontas didn't have anything to do with. John Smith wrote an account of this in his diary. However, the version that he told people was a lot different than the version he wrote in his diary. And then the Native American version of what happened is totally different than what he wrote down. So whatever, you can decide for yourself, whatever you think. But no, the Disney version is way off. So John Smith, he's a soldier. He comes in, he takes charge. He basically knows what needs to be done. First and foremost, he needs to get food for these people to try to save them. So he negotiates a food exchange with the Native Americans that basically helps stave off starvation for the first couple years of the Jamestown colony. And then he leaves. He goes back to England to get more men and to get more supplies. So he leaves. He goes back to England in about 1609. By 1613, the relationship between the colonists and the Native Americans has drastically changed. It's bad. It's really, really bad. The chief's brother has died. There's a new chief. The new chief thinks they ought to get rid of all the white people. So there's a raid on the colonies, on the colonists. I think they kill something like 320 colonists in this raid, which sounds like a lot of people. However, more people had already died from disease and starvation than were killed in the raid, but still, that's a lot of people at one time. So yes, that's John Smith. They hear about this. John Smith has to come back. He's bringing back more people. He's bringing back supplies. In the meantime, the colonists decide the best thing to do is to have a raid of their own. They kidnap Pocahontas and bring her back to the Jamestown settlement. They bring her in. What they're doing is trying to force a treaty between the Native Americans and the English. That's what they want. So while she is being held captive, they put her in the home of where is she? Oh, hold on. We'll talk about John Rolfe. Hold on. They put her in the home of a minister in the settlement. And while there, his wife and daughters basically, I don't want to say train, they teach her how to be a proper English lady. So they change her clothes, obviously. They put clothes on her, basically. They teach her how to cook, and they teach her how to sew, and they teach her Christianity. They convert her to Christianity. So yeah, all while she's held captive, all of these things. While she is still being held captive, she meets John Rolfe. John Rolfe is a very wealthy English merchant. He gets rich off of tobacco. He's one of the first English merchants to figure out that tobacco is where it's at, that this is going to be a big deal. And it does become a very big deal in Europe because they don't have tobacco yet. So once they figure out we can plant this and it grows really well in the colony and we can export it to Europe and they're going to pay us a buttload of money for it, he gets in on it really early and he himself makes a ton of money on it. He's a very wealthy merchant. He meets Pocahontas. They fall in love. I don't know. I wasn't there. Let's just say they're in love. That makes it sound so much better. They meet, they fall in love, they get married. He marries Pocahontas. When he marries her, she gets baptized. She baptizes her, they baptize her into Christianity, and so she changes her name. She is no longer Manitowoc. She is now Rebecca. She has a Christianized name now. So Rebecca, she's Rebecca Rolfe. When they get married, he takes her to England with him and kind of shows her off. She's famous in England. Before they get there, everybody knows she's coming. She's famous. She to them is an example of how the Indian savages can be converted and civilized, basically, in their idea, their opinions. So they bring her to, he brings her to England, shows her off. She has a meeting with the king and queen. It's all very fancy. They have a son, Rebecca and John Rolfe. They have a son, but she dies pretty soon after having their child, just within a couple years after having a child. They don't really know why. I think historians say blood sickness or something weird like that. I don't know. But she's buried in London. They buried her in London. So you can visit her grave. It's along the Thames River in London. Anywho, okay. What else are we doing? Okay, so let's talk tobacco. Your book goes into a lot of detail, way more detail than I felt was necessary about tobacco and how important it is to the English colonies. It's a big deal. It really is. I get that. But man, they spend like 5 pages on how important tobacco is. Whew. Okay. So tobacco in Americas, it's first introduced by John Rolfe as a plant from the Caribbean. He brings seeds with him from the Caribbean. Very popular in England. It's even sold as medication for a while in Europe as a medication for colds and indigestion. I don't know. The first crop to England was in 1613, about 10,000 pounds a year-ish. They are exporting to England. There's a boom to the economy of Jamestown because instead of planting food, they start planting tobacco, which has pros and cons. Pros, they're going to make money because tobacco is in high demand, so they'll make money off of this. Cons, there's no food. All the land that they were supposed to use to plant food to feed themselves is now being used to grow tobacco. So, you know, there you go. 2/3 of all of the settlers who first come to Jamestown die within the first 2 years, either from disease or from starvation. But by the 1630s, they are sending roughly 1 million pounds of tobacco to England every year. That's a lot. That's a lot of tobacco. And in the beginning, they're using indentured servants a lot. Native Americans, some, not really a lot, but mostly indentured servants. And your book talks a lot about indentured servitude. So here we go. Indentured servants, they're mostly English, Irish, Scottish, coming over to the New World. They were poor and couldn't afford the trip, so they have somebody pay their way. That's the deal. Sign a contract. If I paid your way to the New World, then you owe me 5 years of service. Basically, there's a time limit on it, so it's anywhere from 4 to 7 years of service. And then at the end of your terms of service, then you're free to do what you want. And I usually had to give you, I don't know, a set amount of money and like a plot of land. Or I think your book says like a suit of new clothes or something. Like I'll give you something at the end of your service to help you get started to make your own way now. And a lot of people in England decided that this was the way to go, just to get to the New World. Work it off, 4 to 7 years. In the whole scheme of things, is not that big a deal. So that's the idea here. The thing is with indentured servants, well, I don't know. You tell me, what's the thing with indentured servants? Why would we want to switch from indentured servitude to African slavery specifically? Why?
Didn't it say that the indentured servants that they didn't work as hard because they knew that they were gonna be free at some point, so they hold resentment and they were like, well, why should I work as hard for this person when I'm about to be free?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a big part of it. They're biding their time, essentially, is what they're doing. The other big part of this is look, I'm sorry, this is just the reality of the situation of 1620 North America. African slaves are more economical. You pay for them one time and you never have to release them. They will work for you as long as they are there and as long as they are alive. So it's a one-time investment. You don't have to give them anything. You don't have to release them at the end of so many years. They don't get their freedom. You can buy and sell them as necessary. Whereas with an indentured servant, you can sell an indenture to somebody else, but there's still a time limit there. There's still a set amount of time that this person has to work. And that's not the case with African slaves. So, and then come to find out, there's a lot more of them. There's a lot more African slaves to be brought to the New World. And there's not as many indentured servants coming over. So there's a few reasons. Horrible, horrible reasons, but those are the reasons, basically, that we're switching over to African slavery in the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about Bacon's Rebellion. Your book goes into some pretty, it's a lot. I don't know. I'm not thrilled with this textbook so far, but I didn't pick it, whatever. Okay, so basically the English government is trying to tighten up control over the colonies that they have there at the moment. To try to strengthen the monarchy. What's good for the colonies is good for the crown, because they practice a type of economics called mercantilism. Mercantilism is kind of a new thing in the 1600s. So the idea behind mercantilism is basically a country goes out and they establish colonies in other areas, and the sole purpose of those colonies is to make money for the mother country, for the original country. Whether it is through trade, whether it's through exports, whether it's through, crops, tobacco for a while is what it is. Slaves at one point is a huge part of the economy. Those sorts of things. Taxes are a huge part of that because you own that land. The England owns that land, so they can pretty much do whatever they want to with it. So they tax it. Anybody who lives there has to pay taxes to the crown. But that is all part of mercantilism. The whole idea that a colony exists to make money for the country that owns it, for the country in charge. So they start to kind of tighten up control over the English colonies to try to get more money out of them, to try to see what they could basically get out of it. They passed the Navigation Acts, England does, in 1650. There's three or four of them, Navigation Acts. The first one's 1650. I think the next one's the next year, and then a couple years later is another one. But they pass a whole bunch of them. What? Oh my gosh, I just got a text message that said my kids are out of school tomorrow for a snow day. What? How does that happen? They don't leave the house. How are we having a snow day when we never leave the house? Whatever. I guess we can sleep late though. Maybe that'll be nice. Okay, so Navigation Acts. Basically, colonial goods had to be transported in English ships with a mostly English crew. That's the idea behind the Navigation Acts. They're all trying to achieve the best form of mercantilism they can get to. What's good for England is the best policy going. That's the idea. it shows the importance of tobacco because that's the main thing they're transporting here. That's a big part of it. So in that vein, this guy on the right here is William Berkeley, and he's the royal governor. What do I have here? Okay, so he's the royal governor in Virginia in 1676. There is an uprising against Berkeley. Royal Governor Sir William Berkeley, it's his official name. He's been handing out land and money to his friends and family. He's not being very equitable with the goods in Virginia. He's made a lot of money trading with the local Indians, and he's made a lot of money exporting goods to England. So he's very wealthy. The guy on the left here with the kick-ass mustache and goatee is Nathaniel Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon is a farmer, and he basically is sick of it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like the fact that Berkeley is getting rich and he's not sharing the wealth, basically. He's not contributing to any part of his community, only to his friends and family. So Bacon is tired of Berkeley's policies, and so he decides to challenge him. He gains the support of the local Native American tribes because they're sick of it too. He also gains the support of the local farmers who want more land to farm. They want to keep more of their goods. They want to keep more of their profits. He also has the support of all the indentured servants and the slaves that are there because they're poor too. They want a piece of the action. So Bacon tells them, we're going to overthrow Berkeley. And then when I'm in power, I will redistribute this land more evenly. I'll give you more money. I'm not going to give all my, land and money to just friends and family. It'll be more even. It'll be more equal. That's the idea. They're successful. Bacon is successful, and he runs Berkeley out of the Chesapeake Bay area, the whole region. He runs them out. And then in a celebration of their victory, they torch Jamestown. I don't know. I had a student one time tell me that in his opinion, it was like when the Eagles won the Super Bowl and then they burned down like Philadelphia, they like set everything on fire. I don't know. Apparently they had to grease all the poles in Philadelphia so nobody could climb poles and set stuff on fire. That's how bad it was. I don't know. That seems insane to me that you're that excited that you want to burn everything down. Seems counterintuitive, but I guess it happens. So they torch Jamestown. The thing is, pretty soon after this victory, yeah, there they are negotiating. Okay, pretty soon after this victory, Bacon dies. Nathaniel Bacon dies. His obituary is awful. I don't know if it's in a reading or if you have access to it as a link in your contact stuff, but his obituary is terrible. It talks about what an awful person he is and that he died from an infestation of vermin. That was his official cause of death. So, ew, I don't know. I don't even want to know what that means, like how he died. That just sounds awful to me. But he died shortly after his victory, which leaves this whole group of people without a leader. So they basically just kind of disband, kind of fall apart without somebody to hold them together. Berkeley takes advantage of this, comes back, puts down the rebellion, the rest of Bacon's followers, puts them down, and is in charge again. He's in charge of a burned out city, but he's still in charge. That's all that matters. The courts claim the problem with Bacon's rebellion is that there was solidarity among differing groups of people. That's really the issue for the crown at this point, is that you have Native Americans, poor white people, slaves, farmers, all of these guys coming together to fight against the English in charge. For them, that's a scary proposition because there are a lot more of everybody else than there are rich Englishmen in charge. So the first thing they do after Bacon's Rebellion is to start passing laws. They start passing codes, is what they call them. They start passing laws. And eventually we come to know them as slave codes. But basically they are laws to keep groups of people apart. You can't get together in groups anymore, is what they say. Yeah, so that becomes a big part. That's going to show up later, as history does. It's cyclical. It'll show up again in a minute. The other thing that the English are dealing with are Native Americans, because yes, they're still there. And yes, they don't want white people on their land. They are tired of white people coming in and kicking them off of their land. So there are a lot of battles between Native Americans and colonists. The thing, oh wait, let's see. What else do I have here? I just want to make sure I don't get too far ahead because your book is kind of out of order. That's my dog. It's scratching. That is so loud. Okay, so they start to tighten up the royal government's control over trade, try to strengthen the monarchy. There are various Native American skirmishes. The Pequot War. Where's the Pequot War? Where do I have it? I don't even know where I put it. There's the Pequot War. And then your book starts talking about bringing in more slaves, and specifically slaves through the Caribbean colonies. What time is it? Ooh, okay, I'm just gonna do this super fast, and then we're gonna go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Caribbean colonies. So this map shows basically who owned what in the Caribbean in about 1700-ish. A lot of tiny islands in the Caribbean, but those tiny islands have a very specific, what's the word I'm looking for? Climate, a very specific climate that makes them very good for growing things. One thing in particular, sugar. They become known as the Sugar Islands, the Spice Islands. Sugar Islands first, because there are a lot of sugar plantations originally in the Caribbean colonies. And Europe's appetite for sugar gets big. Once they get a little bit, they want a lot more, just like tobacco. It's the same deal. They get a little bit of it and they realize, oh, yes, that's good. Let's have more. And so they start these sugar plantations on the Caribbean islands, specifically to transport all the sugar back to Europe. Barbados in particular is the main island here. There it is. So Barbados specifically becomes the key island where sugar plantations are. It becomes the key island to the English trade, basically. It's far enough away from the Spanish sailing routes to avoid pirates, because that's a very real bad concern during this time, or war, even with the Spanish over this. By 1660, there are almost 26,000 English living in the Caribbean islands, specifically right around Barbados, on and right around Barbados. A lot of white people in the Caribbean in 1660. Because I don't know if you know anything about how sugar gets made, but it is a crazy labor-intensive process. Very labor-intensive. And it takes a lot of people doing a lot of work just to make a little bit of sugar. Cane, you got to grow it, you got to cut it, you got to boil it, you got to dry it, you got to mill it, you got to cook it again, then you gotta dry it. I mean, it's a whole thing. It is a lot of work. So because indentured servants are expensive, one, and two, it's hard to get indentured servants to volunteer to move to a Caribbean island to work on a sugar plantation. That's not really where they're looking to go for their indentured service. So the Europeans turned to African slavery. The Portuguese, remember we talked about them being big in the slave trade? They've been doing it now for a while, and they've become especially good at it. So we adopt almost European English, adopt almost the Portuguese model of bringing African slaves into the New World. For the first 10 years that England is in Barbados, there are roughly 20,000 African slaves brought into Barbados. The word, they actually turn it into a, what is that, a verb? They turn it into a verb. To be Barbadosed means that you have been kidnapped from Africa and brought to work on a sugar plantation. Doesn't matter where you live, but that term, Barbadosed, becomes synonymous with being brought in as a slave to work a sugar plantation. That's how prevalent it is. There's no real precedent for African slavery in the English law. So they basically make up these slave codes and slave laws as they go along. By 1661, just right when they first start here, they start instituting slave codes. Basically setting up a system of segregation to keep Africans separate from the English is what we're doing here. Harsh punishments for slaves for going against their masters. Relatively no punishment for masters doing anything to their slaves. Very little. I mean, they're writing the laws, so it's exactly what you would expect. And it leads to this, the slave trade. So you start in Europe, get your supplies, get your men, travel to Africa, the coast of Africa here. You pick up your slaves, then travel to the Caribbean islands. The Caribbean becomes the place where you take African slaves first, basically. If a slave is brought to the Caribbean islands and works a sugar plantation, Europeans start calling those slaves seasoned. Those are seasoned slaves because they have already learned what is expected of them. They know the rules and they know how to work a plantation. So those slaves are now referred to as seasoned slaves. And a lot of them then get transported up into North America. A seasoned slave costs almost 1.5 times what an unseasoned slave does, because they know the deal. I know this is horrible, and I know it's disgusting to think about. If a slave is not transported to a Caribbean colony and comes straight to like the Carolinas or something, then they're called saltwater slaves because they have not been properly seasoned. I know, it's disgusting. Okay, this slave triangle lasts for hundreds of years, 150-ish years, roughly. It's awful. It's awful. This part here between Africa and the Caribbean colonies, that's referred to as the Middle Passage. And the Middle Passage is by far the most dangerous and awful part of this whole trip. Mainly because, here we go, mainly because they are, oh, here you go. There's a description, a drawing of a slave ship. This is in a book by a Portuguese slave trader, to properly show how to pack a slave ship. They know from experience that roughly 10% of these slaves are going to die en route to the New World. So to compensate for that, the term is called tight packing. They basically pack these individuals in the bottom of the slave ship as close and tightly as they possibly can, to mitigate the 10% that they know are going to die on the way. How awful. How awful is that? And I don't know if you can see very well, but that's a ridiculous amount of people in a tiny, tiny little space. I mean, just look at that. It's insane. There you go. There's the actual description and drawing for you. Blah, da, 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 da. Okay. So we're now turning to African slavery. We're getting away from indentured servitude, more towards African slavery. The Native Americans who were originally used as slaves have pretty much either died off or gone or left. So then we go to indentured servants. Indentured servants are expensive and there's a time limit on them. So then we start turning towards African slavery. And this is the result of that. I hate ending on such an awful idea and such a terrible note. But really that's all that I have for today. So does anybody have any questions before we end? Anybody? My face is still red. Look how bad I'm blushing. Good Lord. Woo. Okay. So there's a quiz this week, and it's just on chapter 3, and chapter 3 in your reader, and 2 articles, I believe, that are available on the MTSU page, on the class webpage. There's 2 of those. So we talked about the textbook stuff today. We will talk more about the readings specifically on Wednesday. So that I don't feel like I did enough of that last week. So we'll talk more about the readings this week. So hopefully you'll be a little better prepared for your quiz, because I know there's questions on the readings on your quizzes. So we'll do that on Wednesday. Okay, I can't think of anything else to tell you. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we go? Apparently it's going to snow, so I don't know. It looks very sunny right now. I don't know. But everybody's out tomorrow for snow day. I don't know. Whatever that means. It's ridiculous. Okay. Well, I guess that's it, guys. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.